Good morning, everyone. I think we can start, not to have a long delay. Probably there's still some joining during the next minutes, but I would say we start. So my name is Stefan Meyer. I'm the facilitator of this webinar today. And our topic is communication and facilitation in virtual spaces. This is part of the webinar series from the ECI Interface project. And before we start, I would like to give you some general information on the technology part of the webinar. So, well, we start 8 a.m. It's we thought of 90 minutes for the overall webinar. We will have some tools that I present, but we will also use some tools to have some surveys that give us an idea of what kind of experiences you had already. This is going to be Slido, and here I will remind you about the code to get into the Slido several times, and also Anne-Catherine is going to post it in the chat when we are doing that. And also we are going to use Slido for the Q&A during let's say the technical Q&A and the content-based Q&A for this webinar. So whenever you have a question, please go onto Slido, and there you can post your questions. You can upvote questions that are already there, and we will have several spaces where we're going to answer those questions and look at them. Please, when you speak, switch on your video, and when you not speak, switch off your video and your sound, so that we don't have any interferences. That helps us a little bit navigating the webinar. And on the other side, we're going to have a simultaneous translation throughout the webinar, where we are going to use the ACCION tool. And before we start with the welcome note of Anne-Catherine, I think Anne-Catherine, can also tell us briefly about ACCION, so that the welcome note is already translated and everybody has access to ACCION. Anne-Catherine, please.
Yes, thanks, Stefan. Hello, everybody. I'm going to switch briefly to Spanish for our Spanish-speaking participants. Bienvenidos y bienvenidas a todos aquellos hispanohablantes que nos están acompañando. Como tal vez entendieron de lo que ya habló Stefan, estamos ofreciendo traducción simultánea al español mediante la herramienta ACCION. Para acceder tendrán que escanear el código QR que ven en la pantalla con su celular, y podrán accederla directamente en el navegador de su celular. No hay que instalar ninguna aplicación o descargar algún programa. Lo pueden utilizar simplemente en el navegador. Tendrán que mantenerse en esta llamada de Teams también para ver el video, y el audio mejor lo apagan de la compu para que no haya interferencia con la traducción que podrán estar escuchando desde el celular. Es la primera vez que usamos ACCION, entonces también les pedimos un poco de paciencia por si no funciona tan bien. Es algo que tampoco conocíamos antes, pero hemos escuchado buenas cosas de otros proyectos que sí lo han usado. Entonces, por ese lado, también toda la retroalimentación que tengan hacia la herramienta, por favor, déjennos saber para ver si lo seguimos utilizando en las otras sesiones. Y si tienen algún problema técnico o similar, por favor, escriban en el chat de MS Teams. Ahí vamos a estar atentos para resolver los problemas que tal vez surjan. Muchas gracias.
Okay, thanks, Anne-Catherine. Here I will just give you a quick note on Slido, so you can either use the Q&R code that you can see here, or you go to slido.com and use the T692 code to access this event. My name, Stefan Meyer. I'm an organizational consultant and moderator. Well, I'm this year mainly working from home, and the home changes a little bit, and mainly from the countryside in Colombia. I have been consulting with the ACCION Clima project throughout the last, I think, 4 years, and so we have been in contact, and we have been seeing that there is some needs on looking at how this working mode has been changed in the last months, but not only in the last months, but also in the last years. And we would like to have this exchange today to guide or to reflect a little bit on how we lead virtual meetings, what formats exist, and what tools are we using. I can tell you a little bit about my experiences throughout the last 5-6 years that I have been moderating virtual events and also giving training on virtual leadership, virtual collaboration, and so on. But also we would like to have the exchange on and know a little bit more about your experiences in working with your counterparts, with partners virtually. What kind of challenges do you have, and what works, what doesn't work, and maybe we can learn, everybody, including me, from each other throughout this webinar. Before we look at the agenda, I would like to ask Anne-Kathrin again to give us a welcome from the ICI Interface project as a host.
Yes, thank you, Stefan. Hello, everybody, again. For those who don't know me, my name is Anne-Kathrin Schlönvogt. I am the coordinator of the interface activities that we carry out on behalf of the Costa Rican interface, which is effectively for the entire region of Central America and the Caribbean. I want to extend a very, very warm welcome to all of you. As Stefan mentioned, this is only our second virtual session, so we have also been learning a lot with these events, and we obviously aspire to offer something to all of you that will be interesting and helpful for your work. I think I speak for the entire interface team when I say that we're very glad to have you here, and we hope that all of the information that you will receive will be well, very, very helpful to you. As Stefan mentioned, today we will be talking about a topic that I'm very sure is very relevant to all of you. How can we communicate in virtual spaces, but it's not just in a way that is effective, but also that is inviting and interesting to the participants. I think we all maybe face a kind of this webinar fatigue, that we're all participating in so many virtual meetings, events, and they're probably all very similar in their structure. So we want to see what are options that we have to make these events more interesting and more dynamic, so that people don't just log in and basically do other stuff while they're online. Stefan will guide us through this session. He will present certain tips and tools that we have identified that we think might be useful, but we also very much want to encourage an exchange of experiences. So we actively want you to share your experiences, your best practices, your challenges, but also problems you have faced, so that we can all learn from one another and from our different experiences that we have had. And I just want to say I highly hope this session will be interesting and helpful to all of you. Please let us know in case you have any observations. We highly appreciate any feedback, also to further improve all the activities that we are offering on behalf of the interface. So without further ado, Stefan, I give it back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Anne-Kathrin. So what are we going to do today? I will give you a short introduction. I'm a communication scientist, so for me, I'm always coming a little bit from the theory, looking at why or what is different when we are communicating virtually. So we're going to have a little base short introduction for that, and then we're going to look into the three main, let's say, spheres that we identified are relevant to our work here, which is leading virtual meetings. What is different when those meetings are held with the tools that are reducing a little bit our perception. What are formats? also listening a little bit what are formats that you know. I can tell you a little bit about formats that I know, that I have been facilitating, and a little bit looking at the difference, because quite often we tend to try to digitize our presential formats into the digital world. And there's where the challenges start. And last but not least, of course, the tools. However, I will look a little bit more generic, give you some examples of the tools, depending also what is your interest, that we're going to check with Slido as well, because there is quite some differences with organization limits, concerns about data security and so on. So we're going to look like what kind of types of tools exist and how can we use them in our meetings. And the last part is exchanging the experiences that you have made in the past with meeting formats, tools, and leading those meetings. Okay, let's get started right away with the introduction. Well, I posted this image here because when I was coaching teams in the past 5 years, quite often we were looking a little bit of seeing that those teams are distributed more and more, not only let's say in the international cooperation projects, but also in the private sector, and we realized that the tools that are used in the personal and in the institutional life of those team members were quite different. And we also try to apply and see and try to categorize a little bit how they are acting in those spheres. So on one hand side, following the concept of David White, there is the digital visitor, and on the other side there's the resident. And so we were looking at what can we learn if somebody is a resident in his personal life, but only a visitor in his professional life. So how can we apply? How can we make use of those resources? This image that you see here is basically was a little scrabble from my experience. I think this is 2012. So there's quite some tools that are no longer in use, like Viper. There are others that are still there, and like LinkedIn, search engines, and so on. And well, however, today there's many more tools, and throughout the last 6 months, I think everybody has learned at least one new tool for collaborating in one or the other way. When we look at those kind of media choices that we make, we see that there are two kind of axes here to categorize them. One is like, what kind of communication do we have? Are we communicating one person to many, or do we have a many to many communication? Do we want to communicate in a synchronic way or in an asynchronic way? And do we understand really, or do we have the same understanding in the team of one and the same tool that we are using? For instance, when we are using the chat, any chat application that let's say WhatsApp, that was mainly designed as an asynchronic communication way. But if we look at the use today, we see that there are most of the people actually use it as a synchronic communication. But there are differences in how long do we, or what time do we give the receiver to answer our question when we send a question throughout, or any kind of message throughout a chat. So this is something that we haven't learned. So everybody is kind of adjusting it throughout the needs of his professional and personal life, how he responds to different channels and media that he is actually applying. So this is something that we in teams, when we worked with coaching teams and quite often also in team development, that we kind of did a reflection on, do we perceive the same thing? Do we, when we use email, what is the response time that we give each other? And do we have the same expectations here to kind of get a little bit closer throughout the team? And also understanding the different media in terms of its richness. Draft and Langer, they developed this model already in '84, the media richness model, which basically gives us an idea of which media to use depending on the task complexity. So if we look here at the graph, we see that there's on the one hand side, we have the media richness, so from an email up to a face-to-face communication, and we have the task complexity on the horizontal axis from a, let's say, a yes/no decision up to a conflictive situation that we want to resolve. So basically what this media richness model tells us is that when we are dealing with conflicts, we should not apply chats or emails. No, we should try to get it into a face-to-face situation to resolve it, because we have many more channels open when being sitting in front of the other person, or at least applying video conferences. Also, we would not call in meetings just to focus on a yes and no decision, not organize travels to organize a meeting to just hand over information that we could easily send via email or share via cloud services and so on. So this is basically to keep in mind when using the different media, what are we dealing with? What is the task that we are actually dealing with, to not slide into the overcomplication or oversimplification of our communication. And this is, well, why is that? Because I already told you, I mean, when we are in a face-to-face situation, we have all our communication channels open. They are available to us, from the verbal to the paraverbal, mime, gesture, and extraverbal. All the context around us, we can see and feel, and this allows us that the other person, or that we understand what the other person wants to say. Yes, we have feedback channels available. But what happens if this is reduced? So if we go to video calls, I mean, we already cut off what we call the extraverbal, what is basically all the context around. If we are sitting in a meeting room, we perceive the whole atmosphere of the group that is there, the other people of the group that are there, and how they influence the person that is speaking at the moment. This is cut off when we are in video calls, and this limits already a little bit how to understand the grade that we are understanding our opponent. If we go to phone calls, we also don't see mime and gesture. We don't see the other person. We only have the audio, so we can only listen or only hear what the other person is saying, and perceive the intonation that the other person has. So we can kind of feel if the person is in stress, or the person is anxious, or if this person is secure. So this is what we have available in phone calls. And if we go to written text, so what is basically email, what is our day-to-day business, I think most of us probably spend most of the time in writing emails nowadays, we cut even the paraverbal off. So our communication channels available are very much limited to the text that we are writing. That's why, for instance, in chat, they started to include the emoticons to kind of give another channel back to the written text that and chat. This just to give you a short introduction. What is behind the communication? What are kind of categories that we have to when choosing our tool or the tools that we are using, and when setting up virtual meetings. Before we keep on going, I would like to know a little bit about your experiences. So this is why I would like to invite you to participate in a short inquiry in Slido that I will activate in this moment, and to give me an idea also, where is your focus for the session today? Do you want to hear more about tools? Do you want to hear more about meeting formats, or do you want to hear more about tips how you can act in virtual facilitation processes? Also, there is the link shared in the chat of this Teams session, so please go there. I think we take 4 minutes so that you can go through those 4 questions. Please raise your hand if you have problems getting into Slido. Okay, I already see the first votes coming in. So the 4 questions, I will just repeat the questions that are in there. So first is, what is your prior interest for the webinar? Also to give me an idea where we put more focus on. The second is, what tools are you already using? Then what are your biggest challenges regarding virtual meetings and virtual collaboration? And what are good practices that you would like to share? The last one is basically also giving us an idea, and we will go a little bit deeper into that in the second part, where we're going to exchange those best practices. 2 more minutes. Okay, so here we have already 21 votes. That gives us also time to look at the question. There are 2 questions here. The first one is, asking about the access to the recording. Maybe at the end, Anne-Catherine can say something about where the recording is going to be available. And there's one question that goes into how to solve conflicts without face-to-face possibility during the COVID pandemic. This is that one we're gonna talk about later. Okay, so let's go to the poll. I will present the results. Okay. So, what is your prior interest for this webinar? First, 46% say they would like to hear more about virtual meeting skills. 31% say they would like to learn about tools. Getting to know about meeting formats, 15%, and exchanging best practices, 8%. Okay, very good. Basically, the virtual meeting skills is also the next point on the agenda. What tools are you already using for your virtual meeting and collaboration? Okay, so we have Teams, Zoom, Slido, Menti, Mural, Miro, OneDrive, Kudo, Lumio, Google Meet, Q&A functions, survey tools, Planner, Chat, MS Whiteboard, and Office 365, Kahoot. Okay. Starleaf, Hopin, yeah, besides let's say the most known ones, there are also there are 2 or 3 that I haven't heard yet. So that would be interesting also to hear your experience later. What are the biggest challenges regarding virtual meetings and collaboration? Get people to interact in meetings. Technical issues, problems in understanding participants, is mimics and gestures missing, facilitation discussions, finding the tools that make the meeting more productive, controlling time and achieving the goals of each meeting, staying focused, keeping people engaged, creating an interpersonal connection in a short amount of time, inadequate internet, stress if something goes wrong, have the attention of the people and make them participate. I think tools are important for this. Interaction and dynamics, choosing the best format or tool according to the needs of the meeting, choosing formats interacting with the audience, getting people to show their face, keep attendees' attention and participation, keep the audience engaged, allow participation and collaboration and involvement. Our counterparts are communities with little access to technology. Our partners' internet service, fatigue from participants, be effective in time, invitation and keeping people attentive, Zoom fatigue. Many virtual formats are badly prepared, lots of talk but no substance. Maybe getting the majors to participate. No, keep people actively engaged in the meeting, harmonize tools for collaboration. In general, have all partners use Teams. Visualization of discussion and results during a meeting, brainstorming, negotiation. Keeping to time, making it interesting or interactive, keep it fresh and entertaining. Okay, I think there is a lot of stuff in there. If any one of those points are not touched throughout the meeting, please help me, remind me of the point that you maybe have a question. And what are good practices that you would like to share? Focus on one topic, make short meetings, take advantage of features, functionalities, attention with audience. I don't have one yet. Visuals are key. Inception workshop, trust building and interpersonal connection, short sessions, very participating, encouraging people to put videos on. Okay, very good. So let's get directly into the meeting skills. Well, basically, to start with the most important, I have 7 tips for live virtual facilitation that we have found important throughout the coaching that we have given. Basically, starting with a big automotive company that we have assessed in virtual collaboration throughout the last 3 years, training teams from all over the world. And those 7 tips are those here on the slide. Focus. What do I mean with focus? The greater the perceived physical distance, the greater the number of the distractions that can arise. This is not only since we started to be in Zoom meetings. That has already been found in the 80s of people sitting in the same office or sitting in 2 different floors of the same building. But of course, with virtual collaboration, this is much higher, the perceived distance that is there. Also with working in different time zones and so on, this is getting every time a little bit bigger. So be aware of these beforehand and reduce those distractions as much as you can. If you are the leader of a team, of course, you have to excel even more than the others and be an example in switching on the camera and demanding that also from your team that everybody is visible, setting up rules beforehand, and also kind of create a space, a team space virtually, so that there's a certain routine, that there is a certain pattern in your meetings that not only focuses on the technical aspects, but also focuses on the people that are participating in this meeting. So you need to also allow these informal communications when you are working virtually. Reduce. Well, we already read that here also in some of the best practices. Reduce the time. Schedule only 2 or 3 virtual sessions a day with a maximum of 90 minutes each. Because studies have shown that anything that goes beyond those 90 minutes is much less effective. So also the attention span of the participants hardly reaches those 90 minutes. There's even some say that there is an attention span of 7 minutes that we need to change the mode, change the voice, change the presenter, change the tool that we are using. I'm not a big fan of this theory of 7 minutes because the practice has shown that you can easily engage over time spans that are a bit larger. But 90 minutes is I think a good basic rule for those meetings, and focus on the topic. I think that was also one point that we have seen here. Increase awareness. So an initial introduction to the specifics and framework conditions of the virtual collaboration in live settings always helps the participants to better understand their role, how much participation is wanted from the participants, and improves the ability to participate. But this not only, I mean, this is a basic ground rule also for any kind of meeting or workshop that you are organizing. Here it's a little bit more heightened in virtual collaboration because you also have all the technical part, no? And when we are speaking about the tools, you also need to onboard people that are not so much involved in using this kind of technologies, like murals or like survey tools or whiteboards in the digital space. We know that also from presential meetings that not everybody has the same mode of interacting and working with the different kind of techniques in moderation or in facilitating workshops. And it's the same here, but I think the breach is a little bit bigger than we have it in presential meetings. So it's important to increase the awareness on what do we want to achieve in this meeting, but also on how do we get there with the technology, and what kind of behaviors you want to encourage in the participants of your workshop, of your meeting. Alternate, switch more often between inputs, exchange formats, and exercises. So this has to do with the attention span, no? So and it also has to do with getting the interaction with your participants and to make them feel part of the meeting, because it's easy to disappear in a virtual meeting. Speaking to a screen is much different than sitting in a room in a circle and having eye contact with your neighbors of the circle. So if you change and change also the contacts or how the people get in contact throughout your workshop, this can help to connect people, to connect ideas, and to make everybody feel being part of the process. Involve, that goes quite along with the last one. It's for groups. In corporate, always have Q&A sessions when you have open groups and so on. Include quizzes in your and challenges that are fun in your meetings to engage the people, to prepare a new topic that you might want to work on in your workshop. And focus on small group discussions, so break up into smaller groups to be able to have these connections between people. Here we are speaking about 8 people max per subgroup per breakup session. This fosters the collaboration process, the co-creation in your team. Move. This is something that many people don't do. It's really not being afraid of adding small physical energizers in your meetings, especially when you have a fixed group that has like a continuous process and continuous meetings throughout a longer period of time. It's easier than you think, and you have to start trying it. I have colleagues that engage in small yoga sessions in the break instead of having breaks every hour in their meetings. There is smaller exercises that you can even do sitting. This not only is, let's say, the physical movement that you do there, but you also, the attention that you pay to what is happening in your meeting changes completely if you have the possibility to move. And many people are stuck in front of their computer all day, and this, let's say, guided movements help you change a little bit the attention also. And last but not least, experiment. We know this is quite a changing field that we are dealing with, especially now during the pandemic. And that's why it's important that we quickly test out new ideas, new tools, and new formats try it out, and a failure or an error in a process is a good learning opportunity, and exchange about what kind of tools you're applying. Not only, well, that's actually what we're doing today here, but also exchange about the tools that you're using in your teams with the counterparts of your projects and so on, to identify what works well in your field of work. So to get a little bit more specific when it comes to leading virtual meetings, keep it simple. No, keep it simple means focus on everything that you know about meeting excellence in a presential format. That is the first thing that you have to start with, also when you go into virtual settings. Important to define and communicate the rules of the game. For instance, as here in this webinar, we announced at the beginning that all the questions should go into the channel, into the chat function of MS Teams, and that all the content-related questions go into Slido. We separated it because we had good experience in this separation. Also, to have somebody attending one channel and then another person on the content the other channel. So this is the one part of the rules, but also try to use video whenever possible. As we have seen in the introduction, it's really important to make available as many communication channels as possible. So, and this means that we don't convert our video calls into only a PowerPoint, although I'm also using a PowerPoint here, and voice, but to have this double link with the other participants. Furthermore, create spaces for virtual closeness and trust. So use check-ins whenever possible. You know, if it's a big event, it's a little bit more complicated, and it always depends also on the tools that you're using. But there are many more options. There are virtual breaks that where you leave the break rooms open so that people can actually have those moments that they usually have, the water cooler moments of presential meetings, where you have a coffee together or you have a chat before you start going into the meeting again. There's also in other events, virtual events, we organized after work meetups or morning coffee before the workshop starts. That is something that really helps you getting in, not losing the informal communication that you usually have in presential meetings. And also apply asynchronous ways of those those communication, of those informal communication spaces in break rooms that are, even though you don't have a meeting, you have those break rooms. Or you have a team diary, or you have chat rooms. For instance, when working with a big airline, a German airline, they had some. We started to create there some spaces where they would exchange on how to deal with the pandemic now, but in terms of how they deal with it at home. They were exchanging recipes, they were seeing exercises that they can do, how to deal with the Zoom fatigue and so on. So there's ways in creating those spaces. On the other hand here, the next one on the list here is catch attention. Well, it's actively engage. What we already have seen is changing the mode, trying to use as much participation kind of elements in your meetings to activate the participants, and that's why mixing the tools, mixing the methods, and also include energizers and body work to change the mode a little bit. Quite often, I've seen that in virtual meetings, the energizers, the culture of energizers in meetings that an organization had already in their presential meetings got lost completely when moving to the virtual sphere, because there was nobody really engaging in finding out how you could do work with the participants and energize them when you have longer sessions as well. Time frames. Here I always list those numbers: 2, 3, 90, 7, 8. What we already heard was 2, maximum 3 sessions up to 90 minutes per day. There's also to take care of yourself, because quite easily you get into a routine where you finish one virtual meeting and you start a new one without even passing through the results of the first meeting, and so the days go by, and you wonder why at 6 in the afternoon you're completely done, because you didn't have those transitions that you might have in presential meetings by moving from one room to the other, or by even moving to a different place, and so on. 7, it's the 7-minute rule that I mentioned already. I think it's good to have it as a reminder to not stick with the same method too long. And 8P stands for 8 person. That is a good group size for breaking, for breakup sessions and for group discussions. In bigger groups, it's hard to engage everyone and to listen to everyone. There you have to look in bigger meeting or conference formats. You have to apply other formats. Remember, don't just plan the content, but also the interaction. No? Excellence in workshop planning is important. It was also mentioned in the Slido results. What is the aim of the online workshop is important. What are the results that we are looking for? Preparation is key when speaking virtual meetings, much more than in presential meetings. It also means that the good thing about the virtual spaces is that you can already engage much more easily before the meeting and after the meeting. So it's more like a process. You can already ask some questions. You can start the collaboration before you actually sit together in a synchronous way. That also means providing materials beforehand, but also excellence in workshop means that you practice with the tools that you are using. Quite often it's also good to have co-moderation that pays attention to the different channels that are there, as not everybody has his 2 or 3 screens available in having an oversight of everything that is happening in this virtual meeting room. The breakout rooms we already described, and last but not least, visualize everything, as it's important. This is one channel that for me became even more important when switching to more and more digital and virtual collaboration. So it's important to don't be afraid in drawing something that you would also draw on a flipboard, for instance. Or an idea that you have, because it's, or give it a photo, or give it, always try to give it another aspect, another perspective on what your comments are by visualizing it. The last thing, the next one, I think we can skip, because here it's just that you're going to have in the documentation, it's some tasks for implementing virtual workshops. With that, I would have a look at the questions that might be in Slido, or even if somebody has a question here. So there are two more questions here. What is key in order to facilitate a successful virtual multi-stakeholder negotiation process? Okay, this goes into the format already. Yeah, that we're going to see in 1 second here. How long would you recommend if I do a workshop with senior counterparts? The experience that I have made with projects here in South America in the last months, where more and more the counterparts are also involved in those in more and more virtual and Teams meeting and so on, are that you shouldn't extend it much more than 1 hour if the counterparts are not so much used to the format also. No, it's a little bit also in how much do they spend in this, how much are there, digamos, have they adapted already to this virtual world. In other settings in Asia, for instance, it took us quite some time to have virtual meetings of an hour and a half during the last month, because there was big resistance of doing virtual meetings at all. But throughout the process, we could reach and also engage in with the stakeholders there. Another question that comes up here is, could you tell us about the voice moderation tone you recommend for the workshop? I'm afraid of monotones, but also tone peaks during sessions might work against. Well, of course, not everybody is a born moderator. For me, the most important thing is that the facilitator is authentic and not tries to play another one there. And I think the tone always shows a little bit how much one also is engaged in the topic and gives importance. And I think it's important to oneself as a facilitator, maybe record one session or one moderation that one is doing, to be more aware of how to use the tone in his moderation and facilitation. And the last question here is how to promote proper eye care during prolonged meetings. Good question. Good question that I don't have a real answer here. For me, it's mainly working with the good screens and having glasses adapted to working with screens. Regarding the multi-stakeholder negotiation process, I would say I keep that in mind and let's go to the meeting formats, because this is directly related. We'll go back to the PowerPoint. Okay. So for me, the meeting formats have to do a lot with the group size. And here the group size, we distribute a little bit. I would say the categories are a little bit smaller than we would do it in presential meetings, or also less, as the control over groups that are larger than 20 participants require quite a different approach, because it's more like a conference setting where you for sure need to have a Q&A tool that helps you organize questions. You cannot give everybody the voice, and quite often you have to kind of upvote and have like a ranking of the questions that are there, because there are quite often so many questions coming up that you have to put a limit, and then the technique would be that you say, okay, we answer the first 5, 10, 20 questions, depending on the objective of the session or the meeting or the conference. And then the other ones you would take into the documentation, and quite often you can apply that the experts can still answer those questions after the meeting in some virtual collaboration space, as channel in Teams, or that it is documented in the documentation of the workshop. So 3 to 7 is a small group session where you can have a free interaction between all the participants. Medium-sized groups from 8 to 20, you already need to work focused on a specific topic. You already need to split the group. And in large group settings, well, I already said that. And also, if you have focused work, then you need to split it up. And if you split up, most of the time, you also need an integration, a presentation of this group of the results that they have been working on, and integrating the results of the group work. So it's quite important to see what kind of interaction and participation you need or you want to have in your meeting. How open and close is the session? Because if it's a closed session, quite often you can also split sessions into or a meeting into several sessions. For instance, I had a moderation, a facilitation last year for peer learning exchange that was presential, and now we're doing this exactly the same event. But we split what we had last year in 2.5 days into 5 days of 2-hour sessions, with some of the information flow already going on before and after the workshop. So it's a little bit, it's not that you should try to say, okay, we have been doing a planning workshop every year that took us two days with the counterparts, doing the planning for the whole year, and now we have to do the planning again, and we cannot meet, so we do 2 days, 2 consecutive days, the same planning workshop. Pretty sure that won't work that way. So you have to split those a lot of those meetings or workshops into several sessions. And also try to see how you deal with the transition from one session to the other. What is the time gap between the sessions, to not have it too long, so that you still have a whole of a workshop. Because if you have a session this week and then you have another one in 2 weeks and then another 2 weeks, this is kind of it's like a recurring meeting. It's not really an event or not really a workshop that where the people are still connected to the topic of the last session. This is basically the thought behind. Well, the group size, important. Create new formats when you only work virtually. Also keep in mind, because one of the most challenging things for me is when you have semi-virtual sessions. So you have maybe 10 people connected from home, and then you have 5 people sitting in an office connecting. So those 5 people have all the communication channels available among those 5 people. But then you have like people that are remote connected. So sometimes some organizations even don't do semi-virtual sessions, and they say, no, if we do virtual, then everybody is in his virtual space to have a kind of the same framework conditions for the meeting. So this is important to keep in mind, and not digitize your presential meetings that you have been doing before, and try to move some parts in the preparation. There are things that you can do already beforehand. You don't need to present not everything you need to if you want to distribute information. Quite a lot of that you can already distribute before. People can read that, and then they come informed to the meeting. You can keep the meeting a little bit shorter, and work well with the attention span of the people. Another thing is, when planning the formats, is don't overload the people with the tools. So that's the keep it simple. Because if you, I usually don't try to do more than 2 or 3 different tools. Because if you work, especially when you have open groups, you have a one-time meeting, you need to prepare the people working with the tools. If you work with your team, of course, you can have different tools, more tools than 2 or 3, because it's a process, it's a long-term process. So you are already come prepared to the meeting, you know your tools and so on. But if you have an open meeting, then, for instance, when I work with Slido, for instance, or Mentimeter, it's good to have like some starting questions in the beginning, so that people, or even before the meeting, so that people already can familiarize themselves with the tool, and then they know already how to access and how to participate during the meeting. So introduce those tools early. Yeah, that is basically what I wanted to say on meeting formats. Coming to the multi-stakeholder process, depends on the group. So I would say, I don't know who put that question. If we can speak directly here, and you could give us an idea on what is the setting of this multi-stakeholder process, because it could be the peer learning session that we have is also kind of a multi-stakeholder process, but it's a smaller group. It's a group of 20 people, 20-25 people that come together regularly, and that have and in that session they have a clear objective in exchanging on a specific topic. I don't know if the person that put the question would like to elaborate a little bit, so that we can talk about one specific case, or we can also do it later on in the part of exchanging the experiences. So if I don't see any hand up here.
There is a hand, Stefan. It's
okay.
Andreas Schlönvogt.
Okay. Andreas.
Yeah, good morning, Stefan and everybody else. I'm not quite sure if I should speak up in this meeting. I'm more like a visitor, because I'm not in a ICCI project. I'm working with Euroclima, a regional program in Latin America, and we have a number of projects which are working in the food and agriculture sector, and they have negotiation processes running right now, where you have civil society organizations and public sector entities who are working on the elaboration, revision of different kind of policies. So they said that they have some problems now to get people together and to discuss, particularly on these sometimes a little bit specific topics, which are even difficult to discuss if you are meeting face to face. So I was wondering if there were already some kind of previous knowledge how to run this. If you have some kind of recommendations, welcome.
Yeah. So the specific objective is that the stakeholders, they are negotiating on technical issues in the project implementation, correct?
Well, no, not that one. No, it's more about that the projects are working, let's say, on best practices in the agriculture sector. Mm-hmm. And the idea is to upskill these best practices now into sector or even national policies related to climate change and sector development, or to develop a specific policy, for example, to promote traditional knowledge, indigenous knowledge in national policies. So the question is, are there already some recommendations available for them how to approach the public sector entities and how to organize this process in a virtual setting?
Well, from my experience in topics like where you look into best practices and upscaling and so on, it's always quite good to set the stage a little bit, to have kind of a first session where you say, okay, this is our topic. You might give some examples. You might have a panel where you give already also the officials a little bit the space to be visible, and to show a little bit a process of well, what are categories for upscaling, for instance? What are topics, important topics like governance, and what kind of upscaling approaches exist? So you have like a stage setting in a more formal event, and would then go into try to distribute specific topics. Either you reduce it to some similar projects, or you go up to the project level where you kind of form smaller groups that can work more on a, let's say, operational level to elaborate on the scheme and then come back into the group setting. There's quite often that you start as a whole, and then you send the people into smaller sessions. With the public, and with the public sector, as I said, it's quite different how well prepared they are for this kind of processes. So you have to take them by the hand and lead them through the process. I think it's important to give them a clear role in this process, and that is clear from the beginning, to host it as well, depending if you work, for instance, if you work in one country. I think Euroclima is, well, you are working over the region, I assume. So there you see who are kind of also champions that you should have in this kind of stage setting part of the event. For me, I mean, if we are speaking about online events, it's not really that you have 1 or 2 days. It's more like an online event process. It's like it's over more time that you should think and distribute it and organize the exchange. That would be my recommendation without knowing the specifics.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Just one question. Who would you think would be ideal candidates to be trained to run these processes at country level, let's say? If we have a project, for example, working in Bolivia, and they are focusing at this upscaling to national policies, within the project team, should we train someone there? Should we also empower someone from the public entity, let's say from the Agriculture Ministry, to better work in these virtual settings?
Yeah, I would always recommend to include the counterpart there, and to maybe form like a tandem, like two together that also can a little bit push themselves and exchange on the experiences that they make, and share a little bit on elaborating on tools that they might want to use and so on. So of course include someone from the public sector. That would be excellent.
Thank you very much.
Stefan,
okay.
There are 2 more questions in the Teams chat. I will go with Yves' question first because it's, I think, more related to the one that we have just talked about. He asks, or he says that it's an important question. Negotiation means reaching decisions, and in negotiations, there are always people dominating. And he asks, how do you manage that in a virtual setting?
Dominant people, well, that's the same. I think it's it's a little bit easier in presential meetings. you have to work with time slots and with clear channels where to discuss what. That's similar to presential meetings, but in the presential meeting you have more control through the other channels that are available. So you try to engage the people and give them a clear moment and a clear channel where to ask, but also you need to cut them when they are losing track and telling their story instead of asking a question. So I think this is quite similar to any kind of meeting excellence.
Okay, and the other question is by Juan Luis. He says, we did a webinar with one of our counterparts in Zoom with the participation of 200 plus participants. The webinar was programmed in Zoom as a meeting format, but some participants kept interrupting the session, so it was very hard to keep on silencing all of them. We had a good interaction in the chat though. And he's asking, if we do the webinar in the seminar format in Zoom, we lose this interaction with chat with participants. What can you recommend? It's more of a technical question.
Yeah, well, the bigger the meeting, the more people you need to involve in steering the meeting. No, not only the moderator, but also somebody that is looking at the chat, that is checking the settings, that everybody is in silence and so on. I'm not sure. I think there is a pre-setting in Zoom that you can that you need to enable that somebody is speaking. I'm pretty sure there is. But I cannot tell you now where it is. I know, and also in Zoom you have quite some options, additional options for instance, for webinar functions that you don't have with the normal Zoom version, but you can pay for a month or something and add up. If you have bigger events, I think it makes sense to look into those options and what they offer you to better steer the meetings. Because it's important that you are in big meetings, that you are under control of everything, and you don't have to try to track who is on silence and who not. That you have a button that basically silences the people, and that you tell the people where is the moment and how they can interact and what is the channel, where are the questions, where can you put your questions. Okay, was there any other question here? I would also check in Slido.
There's a comment by Marion Geis, and she says, the advantage of a virtual meeting is that there can be interesting and fruitful side conversations between participants, and they are documented in writing, which is great for the organizers to take them up after the event for follow-up actions.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Marion. Yeah, that's basically, that goes into the direction that what I always also tell my clients when they are a little bit anxious about moving a bigger event to a virtual space, that you have a lot of opportunities also in creating a process, that it's not only that you have to focus. Of course, you have to create those spaces for informal communication, but you can also prepare a lot of things before and after, and you don't have this hard cut that you usually have in presential meeting, where you maybe are in touch before with email or something, and then you have the meeting, and then there's a hard cut, and then you go back into the virtual world. Here we are staying in the same world, and that makes it sometimes much easier also in terms of side conversations. Okay, let's see what are the other questions that we have here.
Stefan, just sorry to interrupt you, but can you increase a little bit the size of the questions for those of us who have a tiny laptop screen?
Yeah. Let me. I actually made a. I could go just to the present mode, not to the surveys, to the Q&A. Okay. No. This is what we call in Colombia, Ley de Murphy, when the technology doesn't work when one is speaking about technology. Okay. Then I just increase it the way we had it before. Okay. Let me do this way. Okay, so here we are. So we were the last three are new ones. Can you speak a bit to larger meetings or webinars that you may do with 100 or more participants? Any tips on and suggestions on these? Well, I mean, as I said, you need to have more control. There are some options, for instance, in MS Teams, and I know that I think GIZ has that, for instance, available, which is the live meetings, which is more like a broadcasting. So sometimes the tools are actually changing because a lot of the tools that we are using for smaller meetings are designed for smaller meetings. So you don't have all those control functions. So check on those options in MS Teams. It's the live meetings, and in Zoom, check on additional options that you have, add-ons that you can enable. For instance, with the same ICI format, I think most of you probably participated in March that we were using Zoom, and we were using a translating function that you can enable in Zoom, but that is not possible to have it in Teams or in Cisco, WebEx, and so on. So there are options. Well, whenever the use of the tool is allowed. No, that's why we, for instance, today changed to Akaru. What have been experiences with Mural in meetings where people were not familiar with this tool? Are there better alternatives? Good question, and I think we have here some participants that I have been working with Mural in good and with good and not so good examples. Important with Mural when you have people that are not familiar with the tool is, well, first give them the chance to understand the tool, have a introduction to it, but also, I mean, the worst that can happen with Mural when you work with a group that is, let's say, bigger than 8 and up participants, is that they're starting to move around all your design, pre-design that you have, and so on. So it's important. Mural gives you all the options to block contents and really enable the ones where you want the people to participate and put their sticky notes or their documents and so on. But you can block the rest, and you can structure it very well by using the outline function and so on. So there are alternatives to Mural, of course. I work a lot with Mural, but I also work with Miro, which has some functionalities that a Mural doesn't have. I wouldn't call it better. It's different. I like Mural because I work a lot with GIZ, and Mural has this Metaplan touch that people can relate to quite quickly when you work with the German Development Corporation, for instance.
Stefan, just to shortly interrupt, sorry. Also, there is an integrated whiteboard function in MS Teams that is activated, at least for us in GIZ. We have used it, but it was a few months ago, and we did have some difficulties because basically it crashed as there were too many participants who wanted to access it. They might have already improved it. We haven't used it since then, but maybe other projects have had experiences specifically with the whiteboard function in MS Teams. And also, I wanted to mention Marion also commented in the chat that she has had a great experience with Mural, and they have done warm-ups and interactive moderation. And maybe Marion, if you would be willing to shortly present these warm-ups that you have done and how Mural has been used in your project, that would be great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I can briefly say a few sentences. We did it with over, because I saw a few questions also. We had more than 100 participants. We did a lot of breakout groups. We used MS Teams and the GIZ limitations that we're having, including that you can't even put an emoji there when you have an external MS Teams. But we used Murals, and what we did is before every session, we did start with a panel session, and then we went. We had, I think the longest presentation we did in a panel was 20 minutes, so no long talks. And we went immediately always into breakout groups, which worked fine also with external links. We always had the option that people just use the chat function. They can raise their hands and speak. So they can basically dictate us what they want to do with the mural. And people could use the mural link directly. And to warm them up, we had at the beginning of the first day and the second day, when people were like coming to the meeting and you have the time until everyone assembles, we had little games asking them questions, and they could use the mural board and everyone could see it. And there was a moderator and a team, actually a moderation team of technicians, our own staff members and the moderation team, doing backups, writing cards, correcting formatting, helping people, being there on bilateral chats. And during the breakout session, the same thing, that we always had a moderator. We always had an extra technical support team member helping to get the things done in time, and one person at least speaking and then doing content work with the people, and then copying the things from the chat into the mural so that you can just copy paste it. You can move the sticky notes around. So you have it on the screen, and people could, if they choose, access the mural directly. So you have the different levels of people's expertise and how to use the tools.
Very nice.
And I'm happy to share that as well if someone is bilaterally interested to show the documentation or, yeah.
Yeah, that's it's quite because it's kind of the mural also gives you a kind of a feeling of a meeting room, no? So we quite often we also enable then that we walk from one mural to the next one to connect to the last session, for instance, or during the presentation of the groups and so on. So before we look into the tools, the time is running. There was one more question here in Slido on how would you manage a conference with more than 100 participants in 2 languages? Would you hold 2 conferences or 1 conference and offer translation? Well, I would always prefer to stay in the same event, no, not to split it up and offer translation services. I think there are many tools available for that, from Zoom to Acadu to what was the other one that we had considered, and Katrin? There was another one that we looked at.
Yeah, there's also Kudo and Interprify. Yeah. Those are a little more on the expensive side, but they do have a very full package. Yeah, but we today used Acadu, and so far it has worked very well for us.
Okay, then I would go at, I think, some of the things we already have seen. I mean, when we're speaking about tools, we basically speaking about 8 well, I put here 8 categories. So the presentation part is like, giving structure and depicting an arc of tension, slides and so on, reflection, questions, visualization, and documentation. Then we have the chat function, which is a spontaneous Q&A, additional communication channel, also one-on-one, and backup in case of technical difficulties as well. The whiteboard, as we said, there are many different whiteboards. I still haven't found, for instance, a tool that is convincing to me to replace actually a flip chart where I can write on the tablet or something. You can do it, but they're all kind of a bit slow or not really embedded in other functions. But whiteboards and typing and so on works quite well. For me, it's important to always have something available immediately to visualize something. And there, Miro or Mural, for instance, works for me quite fine. And you also have there the option to Google images or include images from the web quite quickly. It's quite intuitive. The Q&A, well, there is specialized Q&A tools as well to structure a little bit the questions that come in and answers as well, where you can pre-select which ones you're going to answer. I even sometimes use, well, basically we started to use Slido as a tool for presential meetings, for large meetings where people were putting their questions into the application. I think that was like 3 years ago. And now the switch to digital was quite easy then. Survey tools, what we have seen, what we have used already as well, which is in this case, for instance, the most common ones is Mentimeter and Slido. There are also some that are going a little bit more into the fun corner, which is where also Kudo goes, Kahoot, and so on. That is more used by educational institutions. Then we have the breakout rooms. It's a bit different, the use of breakout rooms, for instance, between Zoom and Teams. In Teams, basically, you are working, I think they are working on providing a solution, but what we have been doing in the past months was always when we work on breakout rooms, for instance, in trainings, then we established sub-channels for those breakout rooms, so they meet in there. They can also have exchange there with uploading documents and so on, because as you know, in Teams every channel is backed up by a SharePoint, so it's quite useful. Whereas in Zoom it's much more easy to with one click split the group into the breakout rooms in a predefined way. So it's just one click away, and you don't have to look if everybody really goes now to the different channel. There's different opportunity also in WebEx, for instance, to organize breakout rooms that are quite similar to one or the other. Visualization, well, this is all what we have been talking about, Miro, Mural, and so on. And I also put in here as a tool the bodywork. There's quite some good ideas that you can find in the internet on energizers and short introductions. You can also do the checkout, for instance, with a gesture, and everybody switches on the camera and so on. So there's many tools. We could look into one or the other here. Maybe in the chat where you could write which one you would like to go. We have had prepared a mural where we could put the experiences, but as I have seen, well, one type is running and two, there have been already some exchanges that we would put into the documentation. I don't know how much sense it makes to document now best practices in addition to what we have had already. But maybe we look at the questions, and I could give you a short look into Mural or Miro for those that haven't been using it. But I think the questions are the most important for me at the moment. So there's one more question here in Slido by Rita Leon. Is there a way to ensure that participants will read the information that is sent to them before a meeting in case of semi-open meetings? Good question. To ensure, well, I think it's a little bit the group pressure that you have then if some are not reading what is there, but I don't see a, let's say, a digital or virtual way in ensuring that somebody is reading it. But maybe there's someone with an idea on that here in our group. Are there additional questions in Anne-Catherine?
No, so far the chat, there's no new questions in the chat.
Okay, so maybe I go quickly to Mural, and then as time is already up, we would go into looking into the upcoming webinars and the evaluation. Okay, so Mural, let's do it with Mural. Which one? Here. So, for instance, here today we kept it quite simple and just had a basic Mural for documenting what we were talking about in this webinar, and I had Maria Antonia supporting me on documenting like some of the key points here. So basically, what you have is like a we would say in Spanish a pizarra, a pin board, where you can stick everything, all the sticky notes that you want in a way, organize them and format them as you like, and you can also put text. You can put photos. For instance, what I said, you can search the web for any kind of visualization. Here we could put a webinar, for instance, and then you have photos that kind of show you how a webinar could be visualized. This is quite helpful to make it not so boring working with the sticky notes. But and there you can use templates. You can vote, have voting sessions on different options. I think this is also quite nice when you have bigger groups and you need to find a decision. So you can open a voting session on what you're doing here, and everybody who logs in, because you can share your mural to visitors. You can also invite a whole team creating that. Of course, it's also a paid version and so on, but it allows you to really co-create it. And with one of the projects participating today, with Mauricio, I think is still here. We have been, for instance, working on a planning. Well, we did a planning work of a public-private partnership, where we were working together on the planning board, and we also worked on it in between of two sessions, and I just helped to organize it a little bit. But what is also quite helpful is you have frameworks here that allow you to really organize your mural. There are pre-designs in elaborating a roadmap and all the agile artifacts that you would maybe want to use to have an idea prioritization, or to any kind of methodology that you can think of, you can find here, and there are even more ones available in the internet that are not here in the library directly. And of course, you can create yours. You can basically also any kind of methodology that you that you find, for instance, somewhere in a book you can scan, you can have it be, you can import the image and you have it here, which is quite useful in some of the recurring contexts. For instance, if you want to do the business model canvas, and when you work with the private sector, for instance, or as I said, in agile contexts, you can also use it to do your Scrum planning, for instance. So this is basically it. You can also write on it. You have a chat function. You can talk to the people directly, and you can invite them. And the invitees, it's quite funny. Always they always have a little animal here below, so you have a representation, an avatar, which is an animal. This just about mural for those ones who haven't seen that, so you can really move around. There's if you work with outlines, for instance, when I have a longer meeting where I work with several parts of the murals, I use the outline function to really navigate and facilitate the mural, and this helps a lot on not having to scroll in and out through the murals. No. Okay.
Stefan, is
there any more?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. There is one question by Natalie Budram, and she says, or she asks, do you recommend combining Mural with another program, or use Mural for everything? For example, today you use both Slido and MS Teams. So, for example, you could run the meeting on Zoom, but give people a link to Mural for them to draw, etc.
Exactly. I combine them, and most of the tools you can embed in MS Teams depending on your organization's restriction. No, for instance, today we cannot use it in directly in the call or put it in the same Teams window, because there are some restrictions in the German Development Corporation. So. But it doesn't matter, because you can always, everybody can log in to the mural, and I, as a facilitator, share the screen looking at the mural. So the same with Miro, the same with Slido, that you can also, and Menti, and you can embed it into the PowerPoint, and the PowerPoint you can launch directly in Teams, which is a little bit better, because when you don't have two screens, you are basically not leaving your sphere of Teams, for instance, and you still have the control. You can still see the chat, and even you can enable that the other participants can move through your PowerPoint. So it's whereas when you share the screen with one computer, then you see what is your presentation, and you don't see Teams any longer, no? Okay, then I have a last quick look here at Slido, if there's any more questions here. Question, could you use the mural as a flip chart with one large card to summarize findings during a meeting? Of course you can. Yeah, you can go here and open just the text option and give it a background. You can always also have the logos and so on. So it has any elements that you would want to have that has to do with the text editing as well. So you can have only a small text. You can also have a text box, which is, I think, what you were asking about. And the text box, of course, you can make as big as you want, and just write here whatever you want in the size that you want. You can, yeah, and link it. You can also, if you have in the mural, for instance, you can put directly a document here, and the people that are participating in the co-creation of the mural, they can click on the document and they go directly to download it or to see it in the web wherever it's located. Okay, so if there are no more questions, then I would say two more things on what comes. One is that we, like in every webinar, we have an evaluation that you find in the Slido that I will enable right now. No, sorry, that was the wrong one. It's the same one that we had to use before. And hand over to Anne-Kathrin with the words on to the next webinar. Just give me a second. That's the thing when you're facilitating and doing the technical part, so you have to switch quickly. So, Anne-Kathrin, your stage.
Okay, thanks, Stefan. Yes, everybody, many thanks for your participation. Please leave us your feedback on Slido. I've also shared the link to the poll in the chat, so you can access it via the chat as well. I think this has been a very interesting session. I particularly appreciate those of you who have shared their questions and their experiences. That was the objective of this session as well, to learn from you guys, and also to see what are your questions, where can we offer certain guidance. And I just want to mention the still upcoming sessions that we have for the rest of this year and the beginning of next. The next web seminar would be the introduction to the platform Panorama Solutions for a Healthy Planet, which will be on September 23rd. I do want to mention that there's a participation limit to maximum 300 participants, because this is going to be a even more regional event than originally planned. We are organizing this session with the interface projects of Brazil, Mexico, Peru, and Colombia. So it's going to be for the entire region of Latin America, and we are expecting quite a few participants. So if you want to join, please let us know at our email, which you can find on the screen, so that we can include you into the participation list. Then we will have a technical workshop in October. This one will be exclusive for ICI projects, so no counterparts or non-ICI projects in Central America and the Caribbean, unfortunately, where we will talk about climate finance and also identify these best practices and examples from the region. And lastly, we'll have two more webinar sessions, one in December, where we're going to talk about green recovery measures that are being taken in the region, and in February we're going to talk about climate governance. So please write down these dates in case you want to participate. If you, especially in the two last sessions, want to share any examples of your work, of your projects, please also let us know. We're also always looking for speakers who would like to share. So with that, I think we can close this session. And again, many thanks for your participation. And we will share Stefan's PowerPoint as well as the recording of this session as soon as possible with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.